Welcome to the latest edition of New Haven News Summary, direct from our assignment desk, otherwise known as my Compost Heap. Let's see what stories are working on this hour. Thank goodness at least New Haven police go to the gym to pump iron, because they've really had to use their muscles. This week, they had to cart out another 13.5 pounds of illegal cannabis from Vapor Us, the Bart Simpson themed store to try to get little kids to buy illegal pot in downtown Westville. This is the second raid, which I think we might even see more of, because people in New Haven are upset, going across the country, that along with legal recreational cannabis, that all these smoke shops have popped up selling it illegally. You don't even know what's in it, and they're all over the place. So this is a response to that. I'm wondering if that can ever ultimately work, or if the demand side needs to be looked at. Like, how can we get people instead to buy their weed at legal shops, like Lit, the first woman of color run dispensary in the state on East Street near Chapel? Because the state's made it hard. They can't advertise, they have all these restrictions. So if we can maybe look at how to make it easier for legit weed, if that's not an oxymoron, to thrive, maybe we'll get more of a dent in the problem. Well, here is the ruler. You got to follow the rules, right? That's what the government says. They claim that's why they're deporting all these undocumented immigrants. But in fact, they're breaking the rules all the time or punishing people for following the rules. We saw an example of that this week when another group of those thugs, the street gang that calls themselves federal immigration authorities, caught a 24-year-old woman named Gladys on Elm Street. She was going to court for an unrelated state court matter. She was following the rules, not living in the shadows, going to court. The immigration authorities knew she was coming, snatched her off, tore her family apart like they've done so many others. If this were really about following the rules and trying to get people to come here the right way, they would not, like in other states, be going to appointments that asylum seekers and other immigrants have with immigration authorities for hearing. They come for the hearing before they even get there. They snatch them away. So this really is just about prejudice and hate and cruelty and breaking the law rather than following the law. Here's one of my favorite books, Radio Free Dixie. I've had the pleasure of reading that a bunch of times, and it's so fortunate as adults we get to read books that enriches our lives. Some adults can't, they don't know how to read, and for a half a century, literacy volunteers at Greater New Haven taught so many people how to read. They went out of business earlier this year, all sorts of mismanagement and fun nonsense. But this week we learned that the Dominican Sisters in Fairhaven, Sisters for Peace, they're stepping into the gap. They have a learning center in Fairhaven. They're going to take over the downtown Gateway Community Center College office where that literacy volunteers have previously operated. Plus they're going to do one-on-one tutoring at their place in Fairhaven. Way to go. Can't wait to read the next chapter. Well, speaking of the book, we talked recently about Ezra Klein wrote the book and how America lost its way in a way that both liberals and conservatives and all people can agree that we stopped being able to build housing and address our social challenges like affordable housing because all the rules you put in place, often for good reason, that got outdated. It just makes it too hard to build housing. We had good, medium, and bad news about that in New Haven this past week. So on State Street, we're rebuilding a street that had been redesigned for the car. They advanced the plan to build 450 apartments across from where Cafe 9 is. All sorts of income. The zoning board hasn't decided yet. They heard a case on Edgewood Avenue, a former livery stable that's falling down, historic structure, and they want to convert that into housing, but some of the neighbors want them to stop it because there's not off-street parking. That is a classic reason we've fallen behind in meeting the need, because we still have those old rules of building cities as though we were a suburb for the car, rather than people, many of whom the cities don't own cars. And finally, the Historic District Commission is up to its old tricks. Now, if there's any agency in New Haven that is the worst villain of the type we see nationwide, it's that commission. They have a good aim, which is to try to preserve historic architecture, which we love, but they apply it in such snobby, ridiculous, ahistorical ways that buildings should look the way exactly they looked at one frozen moment in time. So in Worcester Square, you have the row houses, etc. They want everything to Worcester Square to look the way it looked at one point in time, in a way those kind of snobs back then would never have said okay to. And meanwhile, you have other kinds of architecture anyway. And they've stopped solar panels, they've stopped affordable housing, they've stopped immigrant-run businesses with these ridiculous rules, and they were back up to their old tricks again, stopping someone from building housing in New Haven this week. So the fight goes on, but we can get there. Until next time, this is the New Haven Independent Vlog News Summary, and remember, always pick up and recycle our trash while we still can.